The CTMU idea that reality is language-like harkens back to the pre-Socratics and Greco-Christian theology. Like John 1:1 says, "In the beginning was the Word, Logos, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." And the ancient idea of the Logos, the Word, and the theory of forms of Plato and Parmenides. The CTMU metaformal system is the ultimate generalization of the idea of Logos and the world of forms, forming the essential basis of reality, giving life and coherence to the cosmos, and comprising the metaphysical essence of all things. The world of forms is generalized to the non-terminal domain in the CTMU, a world of design and potential which comprises the non-physical essence of the various terminal instantiations in the world. The CTMU makes the ultimate identity of reality, as well as its internal self-recognition, processing, and design, linguistic in nature, describing reality as a self-processing, self-configuring language, which both describes reality and creates the reality it describes, being its own object, self-operation, and self-relation. The CTMU is a grand system where all of the various insights of the philosophers, scientists, and theologians of yore can fit and be put into mutual contact with one another and grounded in logos, logic, and truth. Which philosophers came the closest to the CTMU? Number 1. George Hegel. The philosophers who best approximated the CTMU include 19th century system builders like George Hegel, who intuited that history was the unfolding teleology of God and universal spirit, and came across the idea of triality, which is important to the CTMU, in the form of his dialectic, which combines thesis and antithesis to form a synthesis. Hegel also fought Langen's battle against the dualism of Cartesian and Kantian philosophy, and boldly set forth the science of the experience of consciousness, which Langen logicizes through his cognitive theoretic model of the universe, and made important advances in phenomenology. Number 2. Alfred North Whitehead. Alfred North Whitehead, the founder of process philosophy, influenced the CTMU through both his work in mathematics and logic, and later in philosophy and metaphysics. First, his Principia Mathematica, co-authored with Bertrand Russell, uncovers the philosophical foundation of mathematics. It sets the stage for the CTMU generalization of the axiomatic method of Principia through its operator algebra and syntactic method, which gets around Kurt Gödel's incompleteness theorem, which says that a complete and consistent formal system is impossible and separates truth and derivability, that there are truth theorems which cannot be derived by mathematical logic. Langen makes his metaformal system capable of generating new axioms on the fly in order to circumvent this difficulty, and completing Whitehead and Russell's hopes of proving all mathematical truths. Whitehead's process philosophy posited a communal ontology in which all events are primary and fundamentally interrelated and dependent on one another, intuiting Langen's idea of holology in universal distributed form, which says that every quanta of reality is embedded in everything else. He also showed the primacy of experience and vigorously opposed scientific materialism and determinism, believing in the creative power of the self-generative freedom of every entity in reality being not fully determined by causal or mechanistic laws. Reality for Whitehead is not a static being, but rather a dynamic becoming, with everything existing in relation to and communion with everything else, and its self-evolution comprising its ultimate existence. Number 3. Henry Bergson. Henry Bergson's idea of the opposite poles of intuition and intellect, mind and matter, combining and separating, self-replicating and self-selecting to have a truly creative evolution, predates Langen's idea of teleological evolution. Bergson poignantly points out, in accordance with the CTMU conception of time and reality, that we must allow space for free will to unfold in an autonomous and unpredictable fashion, and that the purpose of reality is logical and experiential, first-person, self-identification. In fact, this is how and why reality is structured. Bergson had also by far the most beautiful philosophical system of the early 20th century, and anticipated the fundamental idea of teleology, mechanism, self-determinacy, and free will in the CTMU metaformal system. Plato. Alfred North Whitehead once wrote that the safest generalization of the Western philosophical tradition is that it consists of a series of footnotes to Plato. And I think the same could be said about the CTMU, that the way that we generally think about the relationship between the general and the particular, between form and instantiation, is Platonic. Langen has even called the CTMU reality self-simulation, Plato's cave allegory on steroids. Plato's idea of the allegory of the cave, in which the visible world is seen as a self-simulation of the deep structure of reality, and that reality has a non-physical domain, a world of design and potential, which comprise the metaphysical essence of things, called the world of forms by Plato, or the non-terminal domain by Chris Langen, are fundamental to the CTMU. Further, the ultimate reality in the CTMU must necessarily be defined in terms of Platonic absolutes. For instance, Langen writes, "The beauty truth, and perfection of God are limitless, evincing Plato's dialogues in which Socrates asks for the meaning of a general term like justice, truth, or beauty, and shows how they must regress to an ultimate reality. Plato's idea of the immortality of the soul and reincarnation also influenced Langen's ideas of the afterlife. 5. Aristotle. Plato's pupil Aristotle was the first to distinguish physics from metaphysics and combine philosophy with logical and analytical rigor, making great inroads into the nature of logic and empirical sciences. Where Langen's CTMU can be seen as the ultimate metaphysical extension of logic and empirical science, the two thinkers can be put into mutual contact. Aristotle's syllogism remained the state of the art in logic for 2,000 years after his death, and he remains unsurpassed as the greatest logician of all time on the strength of that alone. Aristotle strengthened Plato's idea of the form by pointing out their unavoidable coupling with their instantiation, being the metaphysical pattern of existing things rather than timeless, uninstantiated heavenly objects. Its idea of potentiality and actuality not only anticipates the scholastics' idea of potency and act, and thus God as a first mover, but also the CTMU concept of telic recursion and causality. Langen also borrows from the four causes, showing that reality must provide its own physical material cause, metaphysical design, formal cause, self-operation, efficient cause, and teleology, final cause. Number 6. Plotinus. Plotinus, the founder of Neoplatonism, not only completes the theology and metaphysics of Plato in a rigorous and beautiful manner, but so closely approximates the CTMU that Langen has even identified the CTMU as an extension of Neoplatonism. God, for Langen, is identified with Plotinus's one, from which all else emerges, the inception of reality, its metaphysical identity, and the form of existence. The one is the source and soul of reality. From the one emanates nous, the divine intellect or logos, the light by which the one sees itself, and it is the consciousness which allows things to be distinguished from one another. The implicit coupling of nous and the one reflect the CTMU meta-axiom of mind equals reality, and from nous, the mind of God, emanates the world soul, which turns away from nous to author the physical universe in a creative and generative way, reminiscent of Bergson's creative evolution. So it's a stack. From the one emanates nous, from nous emanates world soul, from world soul, which can be thought of as the non-terminal domain, a world of design and potential, emanates the world as we know it. Neoplatonism also shows that the purpose of existence must be the self-identification of the one, from whom existence emanates and must return as its imperative. The one is discovering what it's like not to know everything and not to be everything, and then rediscovering its own infinitude through local projections of its self-confusion in the form of cognitively bound observers in reality. The one exploring the many. The world soul authors being in order for the one to see itself by its own light through self-differentiated secondary images of itself in the world. Number 7. René Descartes. René Descartes anticipated the CTMU through creating a model of mechanistic reality through his analytic geometry and mind-body dualism, although this necessarily confines his work to only the terminal domain in the CTMU, because at deeper levels, reality is not only extensional or dualistic, but experiential in putting mind and matter into mutual contact. Further, reality is not mechanistic, like the workings of clock, but rather teleological, like the self-fulfillment of a system through local self-exploration and purposeful evolution. Descartes' method of doubt, skepticism, and the search for certainty anticipates the CTMU in the sense that it searches for meta-axioms or super-tautologies from which it can derive its structure, and they share a focus on proving the existence of God, as well as each having creative formulations of the ontological, first cause, and teleological arguments for God's existence. However, Descartes' mind-body dualism, which separates the mental and physical aspect of reality, is too problematic to be overlooked. While Descartes laid the foundation for certain philosophical ideas, the CTMU seeks to generalize dualism to self-duality and unify various aspects of reality, emphasizing the oneness of God and the interconnectedness of all things. Number 8. Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. Leibniz's monadology, which says that reality consists of monads/coherent quanta which reflect the whole, resemble CTMU tertiary syntactic operators, and similarly allow reality to scale in a logical way. Monads get rid of the problematic separation between mind and matter arising in the system of Descartes, positing that the universe is made of an infinite number of monads with no material or spatial characters, characterized as microcosmic souls, and shown to be tertiary images of God in the CTMU, with no self-modeling capacity, but nevertheless reflective of the mind and will of God and secondary tellers. Further, they allow reality to cohere with itself by showing that it is self-similar at all levels, and thus invalidating any supposition that individual creatures in the cosmos at large are merely accidental. Leibniz proposes a characteristica universalis, or generalized mathematics, by virtue of which we could reason in metaphysics and morals in the same way we now reason in geometry and analysis. A metaphysical extension of symbolic logic, Christoph Langen's cognitive theoretic model of the universe definitively fulfills this criterion. The CTMU is a system that unites various formal languages under the same structure, serving as an instrument of discovery and